Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good afternoon. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here on Radio Hamra. To begin, our hearts and minds still on Iran and the people of Iran. And I wanted to share that I know there's lots of protests around the world, so please look for the one nearest you and attend if you can. In the Los Angeles area, or really it's in Orange County, but that's the closest one, Los Angeles, tomorrow, February 7th, from 1 to 3 p.m. It is at Mason Park, Irvine. I'm kind of reading about it myself right now. So anyone who can make it there to Mason Park, Irvine, 1 to 3 p.m. I hope you will be there to support the people of Iran. And then the following week on the 14th, back in Los Angeles, there's the big one that's going to be Los Angeles, Toronto, and Munich, 3 cities that they've highlighted. It'll be Valentine's Day, a day of love, a day to show our love for the people of Iran. So that's next week. But tomorrow, again, 1 to 3 p.m. if you're in the Los Angeles area, Southern California area, Mason Park, Irvine. I hope you'll be there. And so we're still in this. I mean, I guess, we've been in it for decades now, but this sense of anticipation or waiting, hope, or people wondering if they should still have hope, or is this going to be the same as before? The news is changing all the time. I know the U.S. had some talks with Iran today, I think in Oman. And I don't know what's going to come of it. I don't know if the talks lead to a deal or if there'll still be military action. I don't know what even is the best result or next step to lead to the best result. The people of Iran, many of them seem to feel that they need some outside intervention. These things are so complicated because outside intervention always comes with strings attached, or the sense that the people, because they didn't create the revolution, they often don't get as much of a say or the full say as they should for their own nation. And so the countries that assist generally have their own agenda or intentions. And so how that plays out is unclear. At the same time, things are not always the ideal that we'd like, where it's just, let's say in this case, the Iranian people themselves are able to do it. I'm not saying they can't, but there is concern that we might just go back to things being the way that they were, and that there might need some external help, even though it comes with possible strings attached or complications that come about there. So it's a tough one. And I know people are very passionate about this and might argue and debate online or say they know what is the right thing, but I think none of us knows for sure. I think what we do see, though, sometimes people might put a certain message out there to muddy the waters, make it seem like they're neutral, but really they want something to happen. And I think it's important to have certain principles. For example, being anti-war, I think, is a very good stance to have. And I definitely am anti-war myself. But going back to what I was just saying about ideals and things not being so black and white and simple, I'm also against killing. But if I saw someone had their hand on a detonation device that would explode and kill 1,000 people, I hope I would be able to kill that person. It's not something I'd want to do or think it's a good thing to do in general. But in that moment, we're looking at a bad versus worse scenario, one person dying versus 1,000 innocent people dying. You might be anti-killing, but in that moment, you recognize the benefit. And so similarly, anti-war, but when the status quo is people being killed by their own government and having their lives heavily restricted, then it could change the calculations there and makes it so it's not just a black and white rule. So we often try to cling to black and white rules because that's easier than recognizing that there's nuance. So you can have a rule, but recognize there are going to be rare exceptions to the rule. So even if you're anti-war, I don't think that should mean you would not support an intervention. But I've seen that argument made out there that I'm anti-war, so that's it. That's the end of the discussion. Just like the tankies who are saying they're anti-imperialism or Western imperialism, and so because of that, they would support the regime because the West wants it or America wants regime change, which it's just trying to find a simple rule, a black and white way of thinking about things to really no longer have to do the thinking yourself. So even if the US wants this or if Israel wants this, it wouldn't mean that regime change is a bad thing. There are millions of Iranians who are literally fighting for their lives and have given their lives, but also who are fighting for freedoms that here in the United States we take for granted. So it's a ongoing, complicated process. As I've mentioned many times, what I hope is that we recognize that our goal and our aim should be to support the people of Iran, which means most importantly we try to amplify their voices. We can't speak for them. We want to share their stories to begin with, so that's one way of obviously amplifying their voices, but share what we're seeing with the world. I know, being a keyboard warrior or, posting on social media seems meaningless or performative in its own ways, and it can be, of course, but in this instance, it's definitely not meaningless in that you are bringing attention to a story that people may not even know about to begin with, or as is the case with our fast-paced and our fast-moving news cycles, could become out of the public eye or out of the public's attention, and that could lead to it being ignored altogether, which is something we can't accept. So we have to stay united and stay strong and stay pushing forward in whatever ways that we can. This is obviously directed to people outside of Iran, to be that support and to remember that it's not, even if we don't see a result, that doesn't mean it's meaningless or doesn't have an impact. This is obviously a huge change that we're talking about. So millions of small steps get us there. It's not like you're going to do one thing and it should end. We shouldn't have that expectation. So I hope we can keep that in mind. And, when you are posting, obviously there's a lot of sharing of news, which is very important. We do want to do our best to check our sources and just make sure it's someone reliable. I think sharing from reputable news outlets, very important. Also, if you have something that is from the people there, especially with the internet blackouts that they have there, I think that is so important to share those stories and also share those images and videos, because those always have a bigger effect on people. When you hear that people are being killed, that's sad. I know you may think it's sad, but if you see it in some way, you'll feel that it's sad, not just think it's sad, that it really hits you in a deeper way. So we want to share the stories of the people in Iran. And, I know we fight a lot about what should happen, or a big source of conflict is, should there be, Reza Shah? Is he someone we should support? Is that supporting monarchy? And is that good? Is it supporting his father? And you might have issues, with him there. And I can understand all of the concerns as they come up, and I hear them. I can't understand them. If I don't agree with them, I can definitely understand them. And I've had some of my own concerns, especially in the past, about what path is taken. But I do feel that we need to stay united for the people of Iran, because they are suffering. And most importantly, we have to try to amplify what they want. There's no way to do some kind of poll, or this is what elections are for, to see what the people want, to really know exactly. But we have to hear the voices that we are hearing and amplify that to try to make sure that is what is brought about. Because at the end of the day, as much as Iran, we might feel like it belongs to all of us, and in some way it does, all of us outside of Iran. For myself, I had never been there, not by choice, but it was really not ever safe for me to go there. But I recognize that not being there, there's a different connection or different even stake I have involved compared to other people that live there, for a lot of their lives, left at some point, were forced to leave later in life and start a new life somewhere else, left recently. There's different degrees of closeness to being in Iran that people have, which I understand is very important. It's not to undermine that. At the same time, I do think that Iran belongs, obviously, to the people who are there now, first and foremost. To that, I think it's 92 million or so people who are living there. It is their home right now, even if it's our homeland or a place that we might associate as home in that way. People who are living there, I think their wants are much more important than anyone else's. And so we have to also keep that in mind, that even when you think you know the best way forward and the best way that things are supposed to go, I hope we can all have that humility of recognizing we don't know for sure, even if you think you know what you believe, but also that what you even want is not as important as what the people in Iran want. And so we have to support them and to make sure we keep that in mind. I get sad when I see political commentators, it's their job to talk about politics in whatever way, whether they're working for some company or that's just how they built their following and all of that. But seeing what's happening in Iran and it being closer than other news stories or political stories in the world, it reminds me of how sad it is that for a lot of people, they look at these situations and it's not about justice and human life and right versus wrong. It's just, okay, I have to make content and post something online to, try to get attention or speak about the issue or create engagement. These things that I understand, it could be someone's even well-being, their income or whatever it might be comes from that. But it is really sad. And it's just a reminder that when we talk about people and talk about issues, as much as you might think of it as, thought experiments and, critical thinking and having a debate and having ideas and trying to be creative about it, which it is, and there is value in that. But at the same time, never forgetting that we're talking about people's lives, literally life and death for people, literally the life experiences that people have, freedom versus, oppression. It's not just something to talk about like, you saw a movie and you're analyzing what you think it means or, those kinds of things. This is really people's lives. So I think with always people have commentated on things that maybe they shouldn't have. But with social media, it's become even more rampant that, people just think they should have opinion about everything, and they should share that opinion and, feel free to talk about it just because that's their opinion and they have the right to share that. You have the right to share that, but is it right to share that is a different conversation. So yes, there's freedom of speech, and on these platforms, you have that freedom of speech and expression. But you should always ask yourself, is it right to share this content? And always for me, the big question is, what is my intention in sharing whatever it is that I'm sharing? Is it to look a certain way? Is it to get attention? Is it to seem edgy, whatever it is? Like, you really have to be honest with yourself, because only you can get in touch with what's going on inside of you. What is my intention here? And, we all like, it feels good to get attention or for people to give you positive feedback, but we want to be careful how much we let that feel good, one. And two, when we're dealing with things that, again, are so significant, like people's lives, we want to recognize that the most important thing is those people and their lives and their well-being. So try to come from a place where you're doing what's most supportive and just serving in some way, rather than trying to get something from it, get something out of it. So in general, to me, the definition of success should be one who gives more rather than one who gets more. But in our current world and climate, especially, this is encouraged to focus on what you can get for yourself, even if we're talking about, people's lives. So if you can make a controversial take, if you can call out someone, or you can predict and say, for sure what's going to happen, these things get a lot of attention. But it's really unfortunate because, again, we're talking about people's lives, not something that should just be trivialized in some way. So keep posting, keep sharing, keep making your own videos that will help spread the word and spread the content. I hope you'll always focus on first and foremost, amplifying the stories and the voices of the people of Iran, and also focusing on uniting and staying united rather than just attacking or trying to create more division or friction amongst those who are supporting the people of Iran, because all that will do is weaken the support that we are providing them. All right, let's go to our first commercial break. We'll be right back. Back. Started the show talking about the situation in Iran, and another discussion or thoughts on those of us outside of Iran and how we can be aware of what we're posting and sharing and what we're doing in that way, and trying to amplify the voices and stories of the people of Iran, and also promote unity amongst those of us supporting the people of Iran rather than creating disunity or focusing on nitpicking each other about how you're saying things or what you're saying. And I was also mentioning how people are, online and focusing on getting likes and going viral and those kinds of things. And, in this instance, if you're promoting something about Iran, it would be good if something you post goes viral or gets more views, because it would mean more eyes are on it or more people are hearing it. But we definitely want to make sure our focus is on serving, and yes, even in that instance, getting more views. It'll feel good, but the emphasis is on, and our intention should be on sharing what is happening in Iran or bringing awareness about that. And this this topic, it reminds me of some thoughts on legacy, something that people focus on a lot or think about a lot. It's something that I think, because we know we will die and when we face our mortality, something that we avoid in a lot of ways, but we try to get away from that feeling of our death and the end and those things that it could bring up, anxieties, fears, sadness. And we try to at times think about our legacy, because that's one way that something, that way we will continue after we are physically gone. And that's something that can be very comforting or reassuring in dealing with some of these thoughts or feelings about death and no longer being here. Our children are, definitely, I think, a big part of our legacy. I think for many people, there is that feeling. It's a sense of hope, a sense of, continuation, that even after I'm gone, they will be here and then they'll have their own children. And that, I think, is something that gives a lot of comfort in this sense, in this feeling of facing our own death and our own mortality. And I don't think that's actually a bad thing to think about. And not, as I'll kind of get to in other things too, not like, okay, my kids will then go and become famous or well known, and then that way my name will continue. That might come up for some people. But I think to me, the better way of thinking about it is more that they will go on and continue to live. And that means, and that way life goes on. And yes, I mean, even for myself, for my son, I hope he will make the world a better place. Not necessarily that means he'll be famous for it or get a lot of attention for it, let's say anyway, but that he will be someone who is making the world better, serving other people, and being someone who's fighting for that, fighting for justice in whatever ways that he can. So I do hope that he will carry on that kind of legacy. But even there, when it's your own kids, the legacy for me, it should always be thought of as a legacy of your impact rather than the legacy of your name, which is what is often thought about. Some say, oh, like from 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, how many people do we remember? Shakespeare, these people, there's a few names like, oh, so you want to be one of those people that is remembered. That's what you should be striving for. And I disagree with that. I mean, I get the thinking of it, the logic of it in some way, but it doesn't really make sense to me to think, okay, does Shakespeare care about the fact that, he's Shakespeare and we all say his name or know his name? Of course, it depends on your beliefs about afterlife and what happens after we die. None of us knows for sure. But to me, if we kind of break it off into two main possibilities, the two classifications. One is nothing happens and we just die. That's it. Your consciousness ends and that's it. Your physical body and matter might go back into the universe, but your consciousness, or if you people some idea of a soul, does not continue. So that's one scenario. And in that case, well, then you won't be around or be aware of your name being known. So Shakespeare's not hearing his name said over and over again to feel good about that in some kind of way. So if that's the reality, then there is no benefit of your name being known. What we do in these instances is we start from the only thing we can start, which is what I feel now. So we say, okay, in 500 years, they're going to know your name. And you get a good feeling about that. Oh, that means I must have done some really good things. And that means that people still remember me, or that my work or whatever I did still resonates. And that's great. That feels good to you now. But they're asking you about 500 years from now when you won't be feeling anything, if this is the reality. And this is something that we do a lot. We have a hard time imagining ourselves in different scenarios. And sometimes we imagine things in a way that doesn't even make sense. Like, for example, what will it feel like 500 years from now when you won't be feeling anything if again, this is the way things are. So being preoccupied with how your name will be remembered is really something that you're just going to be, wasting time. And it's about some imagined thing that's not true. The alternative, of course, other scenarios, there is some kind of life after death, but in most religions or understandings, it's either someplace really, really good, or some people go to someplace really good, some people go to somewhere really, really bad. But it doesn't seem like your name being talked about or how people are, remembering you is something that would be meaningful. Often it's thought of like, let's say, a spiritual place or a place where you're elevated in some way. And if that's the case, then you're not going to be worried about, wait, who said my name, or how many people are saying my name, or what are they saying about me? You probably won't be concerned about that. So I understand that that's how we think about it. It's what comes up. It's like, okay, how do I feel now when people talk about me? And that affects me. So I'm going to care how people talk about me after I die, but it's not the same thing. Of course, we don't want to care too much about people saying about us now or limit that, but we really have no, feeling about what's going to happen after we die. It's not going to be something that impacts us, but because we use our cells now, that's kind of where our mind goes. And so to me, it's more important to think about, well, what do we think is good and what brings about the greater good? And we want to have that impact on the world, not because we will live to see it, or we live until we don't anymore. And then once you do, you won't be able to see it. But because you think it's the right thing. So I think you can go down to the path where you might say nothing matters because, if I'm not going to be here anyway, or, it all goes away. That's where I think some people go. But the other approach is to recognize that, okay, if I think something is good, eliminating suffering in some way, bringing about some goodness in the world, I want to make that impact and leave that as my legacy. And so even with the children, I would say, rather than the legacy, oh, that's my name, and people have that. Let's say if your kids have your last name and that's what I want, my legacy lives on, and let's see what they do, and then people will know my name through them. To me, it's much more important to love your children, raise your kids the best way you know how, and the impact you leave in that way is much more invisible. It's not something that, shows up. Yes, maybe if you are a good parent, it helps them be more successful in some way. I can get that. But more important is the way you made them feel and how that makes them likely to become a better or a worse person. You're not responsible for everything they do. Everything bad they do, you're not responsible for or guilty for it. Everything good they do, you don't get credit for. But we know that how you love them and treat them will impact who they become at some level, will have that impact. So leave a positive legacy in that sense. And so I say that because we can also recognize that and try to bring it more into our current living life. So not just about, after I die, it doesn't matter, but realize how little it matters now. that same analogy of, okay, 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, how many people will be remembered? It could be a reminder that people won't remember your name. And so you're fighting for, people to remember you now, or people in like a small circle to remember you. But what's really the value of that, or how much should we preoccupy ourselves with that, rather than the notion that we can try to bring about good things that often don't get seen, and often we can see people who are preoccupied with their name being on everything. Our president is one of those people, but like this like mindset of making sure your name is on things, so you are currently being seen everywhere, but then also so you are remembered in some way. And the important thing should be, what is the impact of the things that you are doing? That is something that, to me, can have meaning. And not that you'll experience it after you die, but you want to set forward things that you think are the right way for things to be, or to make things happen in a better way. And so when it comes to the situation of Iran, I'm hopeful that the regime will be changed very soon. And we don't know exactly how soon, hopefully very, very soon. But people have been fighting against this regime for 47 years, many of them no longer alive. Many, as we've learned, thousands killed recently, and also many who have just died of old age, died of a variety of causes over time in these 47 plus years, and who have made positive impacts in trying to help bring about this regime change. And I don't think we would say that those people's contributions, their impacts, were meaningless. Even now, when the regime has not changed, we already would say that there's meaning in what they have done and value, because they fought for what they thought was right, fought for justice, fought for people who were oppressed, whether that was themselves or also themselves and other people, but they fought for something that was right. And so we are all that person or those people too, in the sense that we will one day not be here. We don't know if whatever we fight for will change in our lifetime or be solved in our lifetime. That's something we often focus on. But we would hopefully be someone who contributes in a positive way to more good things happening. Many of them will happen after our death. There is some kind of proverb of, there's real wisdom or kindness, something of people who plant trees whose shade they will never sit under, meaning that, you might plant a tree that'll take 100 years to grow into some kind of like height where it will have, be big enough for people to sit under it. And you won't be one of those people that gets to sit under that tree, but you've contributed something that will leave a positive impact for future generations. And that is a true sign of morality, that it isn't just for yourself. So with everything happening in Iran, we can get short-sighted in results in general. I do hope things change very soon, but also already I think for people it's felt like a long time when, in the early days, people, you thought this regime is gone in a few days, a week, and it's already gone longer than that. Again, hopefully it ends very soon. But we want to be patient in the sense that not that we don't care, we don't want to change, but patient in the sense that we can persevere to keep doing what we can. Nothing compared to what the people of Iran have to do, but to give our support. And if we focus on the legacy of our impact, it can make it a bit easier to recognize, okay, I just want to do the right things, the good things, knowing that there's no guarantee I'll see the change even in my lifetime in any tangible way. But if I think it's the right thing, I'll do it. And hopefully it contributes to a big change even after I'm gone, but it does contribute to that. And something that I think is important to keep in mind, would I regret not doing more? Would I regret not helping in some way? Because we can all only do so much, but we can do that to the fullest degree. We have a certain potential of what we can do, and not more than that, but we all do less, really. No one meets their full 100% potential. Our job is to try to meet that potential in the strongest way possible, or the closest way to that potential, because that's all that's left, and leave that legacy of impact. And to recognize that we can all get caught up in the attention and who gets credit and who's going to see us as good and who's going to see that we did something really important and not someone else did that important thing. It was really us that should get the credit. We can all get caught up in these types of conversations and ways of thinking and all that. And I get it. And it is important to try to give credit where credit is due and that it's not meaningless. But to really focus on that when we could focus on doing the right thing, I think that should be our focus, remembering that um, even now we don't have to care about it, but especially in the long run, it'll all be forgotten exactly what happened. And if this revolution happens, there'll be a lot of people on the front lines, and those are the people that do deserve the most credit. We're talking about credit, but so many people have made contributions who will be completely forgotten and not known. And make sure that you do your part as one of those people. Most of us won't be remembered for this revolution that happens, but to make sure you do your part as a compassionate servant of the revolution, of the people of Iran, that we're not here to get attention or fame. Those things will fade anyway, but to do the right thing and to bring about justice, to save lives, and to help bring about a free Iran. Let's go to a commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In this segment, I wanted to talk about a saying that I think gets misused or misunderstood, which is often the case. Certain phrases get repeated a lot and become, adages that we use and say. And oftentimes I think we lose sight of the actual meaning because of the words that are in it and different ways you can interpret things, which I'll get into. But the reasons why this comes to mind is that I know almost all of us, listening who are Iranian are deeply affected by what is going on in Iran. And we have strong feelings about it. We have strong wishes for what we hope to see happen. And it can be very, very, very intense for all of us. And it really is. And because of that, we could think also a lot about, I wish I could help in this way. I want to help in this way, or I care so much, which is true. But we have to keep in mind that we don't get, and I don't want to say credit, but what really matters is not just if we feel something about someone or a group or some situation, it's what we don't do or do about it that really matters. So if we don't do anything, those feelings don't really amount to much other than our own personal suffering or hardship that we will go through. Similarly to if someone says, "Oh, I love you so much," but they never show you that love in any way, you don't really feel that love, or really, you might even believe it. It might not really be true, but what good is someone's love in their mind if they're not showing it to you or expressing it to you in some way? Similarly, you can, care a lot about the people of Iran or other people, but what does that amount to? What good is that if you are not doing something about it or doing something with that care, or if you're upset or whatever the feelings are that you are experiencing? And so the phrase that I wanted to talk about related to this, that I think gets misunderstood or misused because of the words it includes, is it's the thought that counts. We hear that, oh, it's the thought that counts. And so when we look at the words, kind of deconstructing of it, it's the thought, right? That's the key word there. It's the thought that counts, meaning that the result or the action, something doesn't matter as much as the thought. Now, I think when we hear that, again, because it has that thought part, it makes it seem that a thought is enough. That if you thought about something, if you thought about doing something or helping in some way, or if you cared and you thought about it, then that's enough. It's the thought that counts. But really, even though we have the word thought in there, what to me the phrase really means is it's the intention that counts. Because this is how, it's a thought that counts should make sense. Or to me is how it's used. It's like, for example, it's someone's birthday and, you know them not so well, but you're getting to know them. I'm going to bake them a cake. And so you make them a cake and you make this really delicious blueberry cake and decorate and spend all this time to make it very nice, as, to give them this cake. And then when you get there, you find out that oh, the person whose birthday it is, they're allergic to blueberries, which is like all throughout this cake. So they can't eat the cake because, they're very allergic to uh, the blueberries that are in this cake. And so a realistic and reasonable response is to say, oh, it's the thought that counts. Yeah, it was the thought of making a cake, the intention of I'm going to put the time into making a delicious cake for their birthday, decorate it nice for them to enjoy. That matters. The fact that they can't eat it and it's not something they can eat because you didn't know, it was the thought, your intention that counts. That's what's really kind about what you did. And that to me is what that phrase is supposed to describe, is someone who had good intentions and did something good. They actually took action. So it's not just thought. And the result of it somehow didn't turn out good because of, whatever type of reasoning. So unfortunately, when we say it's the thought that counts, some people think, well, that's all that matters. So if someone's like, oh, when you were moving last week, I thought about coming to help you, but they didn't come. Is it the thought that counts? I think most people would say, well, yeah, I guess it's nice that it crossed your mind to help, but the thought doesn't actually help. It doesn't make it feel like you cared that much to help, or else you would have acted. So it's not the thought that counts. The thought isn't enough. The intention is what's important. And, going back to the intention of that same story, if the next year the person made another blueberry cake, even though they know the person can't eat it, you might feel a little differently about saying it's a thought that counts. It's because the intention there seems a little bit off. Well, if you know they're allergic to it and you made it again, is it because you like making this cake or you think it looks really good or other people will eat it and you will get praised for it? The intention would seem to be a little bit off if now that I know I still made the same kind of cake that the birthday, boy or girl or person cannot eat themselves. So we have to be aware of when we hear a phrase, really trying to understand what it means. And this is one of those that for me is a big one because I hear it used a lot where someone says, oh yeah, I wanted to do something. I wanted to call you, or I wanted to call this person to do this, or I wanted to support in this way. And someone might say, it's the thought that counts. It's not. That's not what that phrase is supposed to describe. It's not enough to just think about something and then get the credit for doing it. Oh, I wanted to give you all this money to help you, but I never did. It's the thought that counts? No. And so I bring this up because it can make us think sometimes that thinking is enough or has some value. The thinking is something you experience internally, but it doesn't affect other people in some way. This is also why, it's different. I didn't mean to pivot in this way, but when sometimes people in America will get upset when politicians will say thoughts and prayers after some kind of tragedy, especially a shooting. And when the politicians are saying it, people will get upset and say, no, don't just say thoughts and prayers. That's not going to save anyone. Take some kind of action, whatever that is. If you can change the laws to make this not happen again, you should do that. Thoughts and prayers is only when you can't do other tangible things. If I walk by a pool and some child is drowning and I say thoughts and prayers for that kid, you're going to rightfully call me a monster for not actually taking action and think. I can't just say, oh no, it's the thought that counts. I was thinking the best things for that child and wishing the best outcome for that child. No one is going to think of that as a reasonable excuse or reason, or definitely not say, oh, well, it's a thought that counts. Like, good for you. Like, you're such a good person. So it's not the thought that counts. We have thousands of thoughts. And actually, if it was just the thought that counts, we would all be in jail because everyone at some point has some kind of thought of something that's illegal, from possibly hurting someone, or you get really angry with someone, to, let's say, stealing or taking something or whatever it is, even if it's a flash of a thought, because we have millions of thoughts in our lives. We'd also be in jail. So we shouldn't get credit for just thinking about something. We also shouldn't get punished for just thinking about something. It's about the things that we do, the actions that we take. And so when it comes to the situation in Iran, I think a lot of times we can get stuck in this place of thinking, well, it's the thought that counts, or if I'm feeling so much, that itself has some value, and it could show how much you care, which is important, but it's how we turn that caring and that feeling into something, into some kind of action that can leave an impact. And usually that's what it makes us want to do. Feelings make us want to act in some kind of a way. to resolve that feeling or to deal with that feeling. But very often we don't. We just sit with that feeling. So, for example, people care about. I think most people, if they see people suffering, they want to take action. So, if it's just the thought or the feeling, then everyone is equally helping people. But that's not true. Some people actually take action. They, you know, go out of their way. They volunteer their time. They, do things that will help other people, and that deserves some kind of, admiration or credit. But just thinking about it is nothing. That doesn't do anything. And all of us can help people. Sometimes we think about Iran, and of course we want to do what we can for the people of Iran, absolutely. And at the same time, so it's not like a but, an either or kind of a thing. There's always going to be people around you that also need help. Sometimes people like think, oh, if I was here, or sometimes I've seen people write about this, like if I was in Iran, I would be fighting, or I wish I could go do that right now. I've seen a few of these kinds of posts that to me, it just seems like trying to get credit for something you don't have to do, which is always an easy thing to do. It's like, oh yeah, if I was around 100 years ago, I would have done this amazing thing. I would have done this and this, and I would be this kind of person. Or even now, yeah, if I was over here or over there, I would be the one like giving up my life or risking this. Or it's like if a friend is telling you, if I was where you're moving, I would be doing so much. I'd be there from the morning and not leave until you are all done or whatever. And again, maybe there's some genuine authenticity if you know the person and certain things, but in general it doesn't mean a whole lot. So I've seen some of these posts and it kind of, I think, it's frustrating to me. I get surprised when people in the comments like, oh, you're so great and I'm admiring you for this, because it's an easy thing to say that I would be doing something. And that's why when it comes to the people in Iran, we can all think, oh, if I was there I would be in the streets too. But I think if we're being real and having a genuine humility, we recognize I don't know what I would do. We might hope we would have the bravery to go out and protest and risk our lives in the ways that so many of them have. You might want to do that, but you have no idea what you will do until you're in that position. And I think that's always something to keep in mind in general when we're looking at other people, and the temptation is there to judge others of what they're doing, that we might think we know what we would do if we were exactly in their situation, but we don't know. We can't even really understand what their exact situation is until we're in it, or if we, even if we're in something similar, it's not the same exact thing as them, because there's so many factors that go into what we're experiencing, what we go through at every moment, that we can't say, well, I was, in the cold, they were in the cold, I did this, they did that. It's much more complicated than that. So I don't like when people, make comments or videos saying they would be doing this, or oh, just like I wish they would let me do this. And oftentimes they can do something about it, but they're kind of making it so that they can't, but just trying to get credit for, again, it's like the thought that counts. It's like, oh yeah, like I wish I could just, give my life up right now for something. It's like, okay, well, if you do it, that's something. If you don't, when it's just talk, it's not, the thought doesn't count for anything. It's not worth anything at all. Trying to get credit for not taking the action, that's just not how things work. So, I hope those of us will be thinking, feeling a lot about what's going on, and realizing that that doesn't mean you care more. Taking action is going to be showing that you care more and has a bigger impact. And also remember that there are people you can help directly closer to you as well. Not either or, that if you want to show that you care, you have to just take the action and not just think that. I hear that sometimes when you see someone who's doing good, people say, oh, I wish I could do that, but I can't because of this, or I don't know how, or they come up with some excuse that makes it that it's not that they're choosing not to, or they're not taking the steps to take action, that it's somehow not possible for them. But usually that's some kind of an excuse that we come up with, or we might be afraid, or we don't think we know, and we choose to go that route. So it's not the thought that counts. The thought, it's that as far as that word is not what we're talking about. It's the intention that counts. If you do something with good intention, you take the right action, but then the result doesn't end up good, well, yes, then it was the thought, the intention that counts, not the result in that way. That's the part how I would look at it, kind of going back to what I was saying before about don't think about results, think about responsibility. So sometimes you do the right thing or you try to do it the right way, but the result, first of all, might not show up when you want it to or hope it would, or it might go wrong. Sometimes you try to do something and it, doesn't help. If I try to, bring you a glass of water, but I slip and drop it, you might think, okay, it was the thought that counts. Like you really went and the intention was good and you took the action, but there's some kind of accident there and you weren't able to finish the task. But that doesn't mean it's different than if someone thought, oh, I saw you were thirsty. And I thought, oh, it'd be so nice for me to go bring you this really nice cold glass of water. But yeah, that didn't do it. That's the thought does not count for anything, does not count for much at all. So let's show our not just thoughts, but our feelings through action and keep in mind that for others, we hold them to that same standard and realize that empty promises, or if they're just promises or words of what I would do or, wish I could do or can do, almost always, except for like, yeah, there's circumstances where someone really can't be somewhere and they're saying, I wish I could be there. But I think oftentimes people want to get credit for just, what they say they think they would do or wish they would do or what they know sounds good. And that shouldn't be worth much at all. We're not judged based on our thoughts. We are judged based on our actions. So let's take the best actions that we can to do the best good that we can with the best intentions possible. All right, let's go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This segment, I want to talk about a topic. The way I've labeled it before is that there's no pain Olympics, and I guess fitting that I think today is the start of the Winter Olympics in Milan, but it applies really at any time. Very often in therapy right now, especially with what's happening in Iran, I'll get into that, but something that will come up is that a person will share about their lives and they'll say, oh, when I was a kid, this happened, my parents did this, this, and this. And at times this discomfort of staying in the sadness, maybe a discomfort of feeling like they're blaming their parents, can lead to trying to get away from that feeling or, feeling bad in some way. And often people will say something like, oh, like, what am I complaining about? There's kids sick and dying around the world. And, here I am complaining about something my parents did, which is like way less than that. And I can understand the feeling, of course. And I've definitely felt that myself before. And some part of it is actually good. It can be very good and helpful to have some perspective. It can at times make it easier to bear what we are going through. So I think that isn't actually a bad thing. It can be helpful when we, do it in the right ways, that we kind of are in touch with, okay, this is tough, but there's so much worse. And that perspective can be helpful to make it not feel as bad or to help us get through it. At the same time, I say there's no pain Olympics. It's because it doesn't mean the only pain that's worth mentioning and being dealt with is the person who has the worst pain in the world. So it's like there's one gold medal winner and they're the only one whose pain matters and the only one whose pain can be talked about. All of us have to deal with and face our own life and our own pains in our life. And that is actually our responsibility to do that, to take care of ourselves. Not in some kind of selfish way or some way that we focus just on ourselves, but that's really our journey, is to be able to do that, because only you know the feeling you have and the pain that you have, and only you can at least start to initiate making it better in some way. I sometimes use this analogy when people have that feeling of, if you break your leg and you go to the hospital, the doctor's not going to say, oh, the person in the next room broke both their legs, so like go home or get out of here, or I'm not going to treat you. They're going to treat your pain. They're going to treat your broken bone, not because it's the worst broken bone in the world, not because it's the worst injury in the world, and you're suffering more than anyone else, but there is this understanding that every illness, every pain should be attended to and should be taken care of. So it's not just because it's the worst pain in the world that it should be taken care of. It's that that's how we deal with pain. And so individually, we have to have that same respect for ourselves, that, okay, I have this pain. It doesn't mean it's the worst pain in the world, but let me do something about it. If you cut yourself and it's bleeding, You're not going to think, well, I shouldn't, try to stop the bleeding or make sure it doesn't get infected because other people are hurting more than me. That wouldn't make sense. We wouldn't think that would be. I mean, as a parent now, I've been lucky that, let's say, whatever my son goes through, if it's painful, I know sadly there's people going through worse around the world. But, it doesn't mean I'm not going to take care of him and try to make sure he's okay and to reduce that pain. So it's not just that one pain, only the worst pain in the world is the one that matters. All the pain that we experience, all the pain in the world, it deserves being treated and dealt with and alleviated. And that also goes to when we're helping other people. If you help someone, you have someone right in front of you, you should do so, not because their pain is the worst pain in the world, not because no one might be more deserving of your help, but because they're in front of you and you can help alleviate their pain. And that always has value. We never want to undermine helping someone in whatever way. Sometimes it can feel meaningless. Sometimes it can feel like, oh, this problem is affecting a million people and I'm just helping one person for one day and one time. But if we can all recall any moment when we were experiencing some kind of physical or emotional pain and it hurt so bad, and then something was done, whether it was just the healing or someone did something for us that then reduced or removed that pain, how grateful we were and how wonderful it felt. So no act of helping someone else and helping them deal with a pain should go unnoticed or has no value. It always has value. And so, as I mentioned to start the segment, this feeling, I sense it, I've heard it from many clients actually, and just people in general, but especially from clients about this feeling that how can I complain when the people of Iran are going through what they're going through? And again, I can completely understand it. And I agree with, at some level, with that, in the sense that we can't compare what we go through to what the people of Iran are going through. I even shared this on Monday that I took, my wife and I, we took our son to the protests here in Los Angeles, and we had these concerns about, overall crowdedness and, people bumping into him or us and things. And of course, just safety at protests and public gatherings, things can happen. And so there's that risk. And then, of course, thought of, okay, how can you compare that to what the people of Iran are going through when they decide to go protest, and how they are literally putting their bodies and their lives on the line by doing so. So there is some truth to that when we are, oh, you're worried about some bills or something happens, you have to deal with it. It could seem trivial, or a husband and wife, you have a fight and you go, oh my God, let's talk about this fight where you said this and I said that, when the people of Iran are going through what they're going through. I could totally get that type of mindset. And as I said initially, that perspective can at times help us to feel like our problem is more manageable. It can actually be something that allows it to be easier to address. Doesn't mean we make it go away or we ignore it, but it can feel like, okay, it gives us some perspective, some calm, some reminders of also what we have to be grateful for in our lives that can make it easier to deal with. But yeah, many clients have started sessions saying, oh, I don't even know, I feel guilty beginning and talking about complaining about these things that seem trivial or small compared to what they're going through. And again, I can get that. But to ignore our own pain does not help the people of Iran. So I think we should do everything we can to help them. So it doesn't mean ignore their pain and do everything else. But ignoring your pain won't help them. So if your head hurts and you say, oh, I can have Tylenol or lay down and it might help, but oh, they're suffering so much, so I shouldn't do that. Who am I to complain? You having a headache and making your headache worse or making it last longer is not going to help the people of Iran. And so we have to recognize that it's okay. Even let's say that, I've talked about children. If your child is sick, of course you do everything you can to take care of them, but it doesn't mean that you hurting in some ways actually going to help them. Sometimes you can feel that way, that, almost like I'm taking their pain, but you won't be if you're just hurting yourself more. And some people even act on that, hurting themselves, hitting themselves, feeling like I should be suffering because that's going to, somehow, help or make things equal or taking that pain away. And in some ways, there's almost a sense of it's kind of like a survivor's guilt, and I'm not necessarily surviving as in life or death, although sadly for the people of Iran, we know maybe 30,000 more have been killed. So it really is life or death in that sense. And so often there can be this sense of survivor's guilt of like, they were killed and, here I am living my life and, everything is overall okay, except for this inconvenience that I'm not thinking about. So I think sometimes we have this, it's kind of like a survivor's guilt, or it's kind of guilt we can have when we see the suffering of others that we don't have to go through, that we can almost feel bad about it, which some of that is a good thing to have, that recognition that my brother or sister's pain, not biological brother, but by humanity, is something that I don't want to ignore or be okay with, or it's hard to, you know, accept or enjoy that I'm not in that pain. So I think there's something good there too. I'm not saying we should completely lose this feeling. The part I want to emphasize is recognizing that taking care of ourselves is not hurting the people of Iran, and it could come with some guilt. I understand that's what I'm talking about. And even as I say it, it almost sounds like the phrasing of it come off like, oh, it doesn't matter what's happening to them. But that's not at all uh, how I feel or what I want to say. It's that this recognition that, for example, if you are a parent, the better you take care of yourself, the better you can take care of your kids. In this case, it's not the same as what you could do for your children, but the more you take care of yourself, the better you can be a support for the people of Iran. You're very lucky to not have to go. I am very lucky to not have to be in the position that they are in. It's just by luck that I am not in that position, nothing else other than that. And at the same time, I can honor that by doing what I can to utilize what's in front of me, to also help them, to do whatever it is possible to help them. It would almost be a shame to then waste that. So if you have your health and someone else doesn't have their health, to say, oh, I'm going to mess up my own health so that I don't have it either and make things equal, you're not helping them by you suffering or by creating more pain or ignoring your own pain. So I can get it. It can be hard to move forward in general with life. So many people I've talked to, both personally, but also in therapy sessions, just have talked about how life feels on hold in some way. There's just so much of a focus on checking the news, what's happening, wanting to know, hearing stories, trying to connect with family that is in Iran because of, the internet and communication breakdown that is there. And so understandably, life does feel on hold in a lot of ways. I can totally get that. And I feel that at some level myself too. But it doesn't mean that if you don't take care of yourself, again, you're somehow going to be helping them. And that your pain, no matter how small it might seem in comparison, is something to be ignored. I think thinking of people you care about can sometimes put this into perspective. So if you saw a child, someone you really love and care about in some kind of pain, I don't think you would think, well, the people in Iran are suffering more than this, so I'm not going to help you. It doesn't make sense, I think, to most of us to think of it in that way. Because again, it's not mutually exclusive. It's not that by not helping them, you're going to, help the people of Iran and, you don't want to take it away from them. You can help who's right in front of you, and you should make sure you go ahead and do so, and especially if it's your responsibility to do so. And remember that you're not taking away from them. But this general theme that, there's no pain Olympics, that we don't have to compare the pains and see whose is worse, and only the one who's worse should get taken care of. Thankfully, most of the time, there's enough to go around to help. Really, I think overall we could help everyone with whatever it is, but there isn't some sense that it's only helping one person. Then yes, we have one shot of this kind of medicine that helps. We want to help the person maybe suffering the most, can make sense, or maybe different conversations of who would survive the most or whatever, those kinds of things. But that's not what we're talking about. You here, especially, there's only so much you can do for the people of Iran. Do that to the fullest for sure. But don't think that if you ignore your own pain or create more pain for yourself, you are somehow helping them. This is the same thing sometimes parents do have, that there's the sense that if I'm suffering, that's a way of showing my children love. Traditionally in Iranian families, we'll see this more from the women, the mothers. That role has in some ways been put upon them. Much more of the child's care has been traditionally on their shoulders and on their has been theirs to carry. And so it often comes with the sense that if you're suffering, it kind of shows how hard you're working for your kids. how much you're doing for them or how much you worry about them related to that is a sign of how much you care. Oh, I can't sleep because I'm so worried about them, which can legitimately happen. But we can also see there's a tendency to promote this mindset that shows a certain level of care and that you care more than, let's say, the mother who could sleep at night because you couldn't sleep at night. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And definitely hurting yourself or showing that you're suffering, even though you think in some direct and indirect way, it'll give your kids the message of, look how much I care, look how much I do for you, so they might feel loved. Most kids, whether they're children or now adults, will tell you that that's not how it feels, that it didn't feel good to see their parents in some kind of pain or suffering or not doing well. So many times in therapy, I've had this experience of, parents or a mother or father coming to see me to talk about their kid. And, let's say it's a teenager, not sure if they'll want to go to therapy. And, you can't force someone to go. They have to really be motivated at some level themselves to be there. And so I'll suggest, well, if they don't, your child doesn't go, or if it even could be the case that the child will come, but I might add, it might also be good for you to see someone, for you to have a place to deal with what you're going through. And often the child's, oh, no, not me. I don't want to do it for myself. My kid matters, but I don't matter, almost is what is being said. Or, I pride myself in not taking care of myself or, not making it about me. So there could be almost a sense of being selfish if you take care of yourself. But that's not at all the case. Again, you can take care of your kids better if you're in better condition. If you're barely making it, every day, you aren't as strong of a vessel to then be able to hold space and hold just everything that goes through life for your kids. So taking care of yourself takes care of your kids in that way. And that's something I try to convey to the parents, that, it's not a selfish thing for you to take care of yourself. First of all, you should take care of yourself for you first and foremost anyway. But especially, if you want to be the best mom or dad for your kids, the better physical and mental health you have, the better you'll be able to take care of them. So this mindset that it's selfish to take care of ourselves is not something that I think is healthy. Yes, if we become selfish and only take care of ourselves and disregard other people, especially people we're supposed to take care of or are responsible to, that's a problem. But just taking care of yourself is not something that we should think of in a negative way. So, of course, we think of the people of Iran and, we see pictures, videos, and we can't even imagine what it's like to be in their shoes, to go through whatever, the fear, things that people have to go through, or the loss. I think we've all seen videos of parents grieving over their children, which is just devastating and so heartbreaking and so hard to watch. And we can't even imagine what it's like to go through that. So we don't want to forget their pain at all. And as I was saying, we want to share those stories and amplify their pain so that the world sees what's happening there. Absolutely. And at the same time, we can recognize that if we take care of ourselves, that doesn't mean we don't care about the people of Iran. That if we make our pains worse or ignore our pains, that doesn't help the people of Iran. So it's okay, and we definitely should be taking care of ourselves and our loved ones. They're not mutually exclusive. And we will do that to also be strong and be stronger to keep helping and supporting the people of Iran in whatever way that we can. All right, let's go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As I start this segment, I almost hesitate with the topic, because when I couple it with the last segment where I was talking about to not ignore your own pain, or to recognize that, ignoring your own pain or making yourself have more pain does not help the people of Iran. There's some sense of, if I'm going through what you're going through, it makes it better, it helps in some way, or how could I not be going through it if you're going through it? Which could be coming from very good places, but the action on that, again, doesn't help them in any way to do that. And so I can understand how there could be almost this interpretation or seeing it in some way of being cold to them, which, I want to make clear that obviously that's not the argument. Clearly, I'm trying to say the opposite. Because in this topic or this segment, when I wanted to talk about, it's related to in the commercial breaks, because I'm doing a show from home, sometimes I'll go and I have, the good fortune of getting to go hug and kiss my kid for a few minutes between the segments, which is like a great feeling. And I was talking with Farid during the break too, kind of like this getting lost. There's a way of like getting lost in it when you are playing with kids or playing with your kids and babies, which is really a sweet thing. And yeah, it's very true. Of course, I can get very lost in that and whatever else is going on in life, in my own personal life, smaller or bigger things, or in the world, smaller or bigger things, like what's happening in Iran. I do have a responsibility though when I go to my son who's a baby and doesn't need to know and can't know and understand any of these things. And I show up for him in a way that's loving and playful and affectionate and all of that. He deserves that and he needs that from me. And being one of his two primary caregivers, definitely the secondary one, because my wife is the one carrying that burden more than me, but still being one of those two people, I can't be replaced in some way. So I have to show up for him in that way. He deserves that kind of love and feeling from me. So I have to go there. And it's also enjoyable for me, even in a way to escape from whatever else is on my mind and might be, paining me in some way, to just be there with him and for him, have fun, play some music and dance with him, be silly with him, whatever it is that is enjoyable for him. He needs that from me. And it feels good for me too, to go into that. And so, as I was saying, coupled with the last segment, this can seem the same thing, but for those of us outside of Iran, it's not to trivialize or to undermine what's going on for the people of Iran, because they can't escape what they're going through. That is their everyday life and pervades their life. And I've heard from people in Iran saying that they're, even just to do normal things, not just even protesting, but afraid to leave their houses and do certain things at times. I'm not saying that's everyone's experience, but I can understand that experience that I've heard from some people, and it's understandable. So there is no escape, for them. And so again, the same thing about if they're in pain, how can I let myself enjoy not being in that pain or, not meeting them there? But I think, for those of us outside of Iran, we do have this privilege, which it must be acknowledged as a privilege, to not have to be in it. But that also means that we do have to make sure we're not constantly in it. So it's not about ignoring it all. It's not about stopping sharing and, first of all, caring, sharing, doing whatever you can to help the people of Iran. Absolutely do that. And at the same time, it will be important to step aside or step away from it, or even if you have some escapes that you have, to not be afraid or feel guilty about utilizing those or going there. If you play some game, or it's when you work out, or like I was saying, when I play with my kid, that's totally fine. Again, playing with my child doesn't take away from helping the people of Iran or hurt them in some way. It's okay for me to do that. And even in general, this exposure to the news and exposure to really painful images, we don't want to ignore it. We don't want to look away. But we also have to be aware that if we just keep looking and staring at things that are incredibly emotionally intense, brutal or graphic in nature, different things like that, they can impact us in negative ways that don't necessarily help the people and might make us less likely to help long term. So there's always, a balance with these kinds of things, that you want to see what's happening on there, because first of all, to share it, it also helps you better understand it and to feel it. So you have that connection to what is going on, and sharing those images for other people will make them feel it too. But if you feel it too much, you could get too overwhelmed as well. Again, can't compare that to what you're going through in Iran, but for those of us outside of Iran, we do have to be aware of this. And so I've also talked to many people that will say that, as I was saying, life kind of feels like it's standing still. And sometimes you're just like looking at videos and things for hours and hours and hours nonstop. And there does get to a point where it's less about informing and more about almost an obsessional feeling that it's hard to look away. And we do have to recognize that there are these limits, that we're no longer getting informed, and it'll help us to be more helpful. But it's just going to be hurting us to just see the same thing. And so even as I say it, there's a sense of, well, how could we say it's hurting us when we're seeing someone who's the one actually in pain? How dare we look away? So it's not about looking away and ignoring. It's about recognizing the balance that overwhelming yourself is not going to help them. And if anything, might stop you from helping them, from staying engaged in the moment, but especially long term. That if we want to help the people of Iran and to continue to support them, we can't, get too overworked by it or too overwhelmed by it that we stop. I don't know if the analogy is really a good one. It's the one that comes to my mind, that if we are the staff at a hospital helping the patients here being the people of Iran who are the ones who are going through the pain, the ones who are actually suffering, we have to make sure we're the strongest we can also be to keep taking care of them so we don't burn out. And I think this is what has happened in the past. Of course, in the people in Iran and what they're going through, it's a similar theme, but different because they're the ones facing consequences. They're the ones who get injured and killed in the process and see their family members injured and killed. So there's these horrible things that they have to endure and to witness. It's very different from us. But I also think that when I see people posting online, and we think of the previous movements, like, for example, Mahsa Amini and the Women Life Freedom movement, people were posting and posting and posting, and then it starts to get less. Now, some of it might be the sense of, maybe we're losing hope. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. Maybe it's not as popular. I mean, I know these things, unfortunately, affect how likely people are to post and repost and share things. But I think some of it's also we get worn down. There's this feeling of, I can't take it anymore. Or it's hard to watch anymore. Or especially if we're getting more hopeless, it's even more hard to watch because it just feels like it's pain and there isn't this hope that it's going to turn into something or lead to something. And it's just hard to watch. So I can get that. But if, we're talking about not turning away in the moment, I'm talking about making sure we don't turn away bigger picture. Hopefully it's not going to be too much longer, but we do have to be ready that it could be longer just as far as we want to be able to support throughout all of that. So, looking away or escaping is not bad, even for the people of Iran, if they sometimes can play a game or do something that could try to get their mind off of it. That's a great thing too. And I hope they can find that in whatever ways they can, if they can. And for those of us outside of Iran, recognizing that if you go and, play your game or do something for a few hours, and if you think, oh my God, I can't believe I ignored them or I stopped thinking about them, that's not necessarily true. You're not hurting them. Just like if you go to sleep, you can't be like, oh, I can't believe I'm sleeping when this is going on. One, you need your sleep just to function. But two, it's not like that there's so much that you could do that you need 24 hours in a day to do it. So the idea, again, of looking at every picture, every article, and rewatching, sometimes people will say, I've seen the same video 10 times because it's so sad, and I can get that. But realizing that, those things don't necessarily help them for you to watch this thing over and over again, and be aware of that, to recognize that I'm not helping less if I look away for a bit and keep some kind of balance in my life. And especially, as I was saying, for the different roles that we play in life. First of all, if you let's say work and you need to support yourself and your family, you need to keep yourself functioning in that way. In your relationships, you need to be able to still show up in those relationships. Let's say if you're a husband or a wife, show up for your partner as well. A lot of people I'm seeing, they are very sad. So I'm not saying you're 100% the same person you are before all of this was going on, but we do have a responsibility to ourselves and others to stay in the best kind of position or situation that we can be. And then most importantly, in situations where you have to take care of someone else, most notably as a parent, that you do have to make sure you're as okay as you can be. Again, I'm not saying you're happy 24/7 or, you don't get affected by what's going on. Understandably, you will, but we have to try our best to be able to still be there for them because they need something from us that only we can provide for them. They are dependent on us. They need that, but also emotionally, they need to feel us in a certain way that if we are really not doing well, it's going to impact them. Whether we try to show it to them or not, they're going to feel it. And we do have that responsibility to them. So it doesn't mean don't watch at all or don't care at all. It doesn't mean you have to, put a fake smile on your face 24/7 and pretend like you're not affected by things at all. No, that's not true. But recognize that you have to, one, take care of yourself, and also two, if you then go play or if you're silly with them, so I was gonna feel like, okay, how can I be silly or fun or joking when this is going on for the people of Iran? And I can get that mindset and that care, but realize that especially when it comes to, let's say, playing with kids, um, they need that from you. That's love to show them that you want to play and play with them in that kind of way. That's what they need to feel from you. It's like feeding them, just emotionally feeding them. So don't feel guilty if you find yourself, having fun in general, having fun with your friends, having fun, especially with your loved ones and your kids. That's not something you have to feel bad about. And even people when they're grieving and they're the ones going through something, it doesn't mean they're 24/7 sad about things. Often when we're grieving, actually, we have these really great moments of comic relief. The tension can lead to laughing even harder or finding the humor in things that can actually be quite meaningful and important. So, as much as what's happening in Iran is unequivocally a very sad, heartbreaking thing, painful, makes us angry, all of that, and their suffering is very real. We don't want to minimize it or trivialize it in any way. So I'm not saying, oh, it doesn't matter, it's okay. What they're going through is not acceptable, is not okay, it's not something we want to brush aside as, somehow justifiable. There's just none of that. And I don't like when I see people make those kinds of interpretations that, okay, we have to talk about this horrible situation in some kind of positive way, so that it's easier to deal with. I think that's really, really sad. So I don't like when I see people doing that. When a life is lost, that is a tragedy. When 30,000 of them are lost, it's not just a statistic, it's 30,000 tragedies. And it's even, worse that what they're doing. They're killing so many people. So we don't want to just sugarcoat it or put a positive spin on things. But it's realizing that even in the midst of pain and hardship and hard time, we're also allowed to laugh and have a good time and escape and do those things too. It's not one or the other. It's not just permanent pure sadness and anger and negative feelings, and it's not ignoring what's happening either. But you can be fully informed, fully engaged, and yet joke and laugh and play as well and escape as well. And especially if it comes to your kids, we are responsible to not put on a fake face for them completely, but to be in the best position we can to be there for them, to show them love, take care of them, make them have a good time, make them feel as good as possibly can be, shield them from that pain, and then hopefully try to change things so that kind of pain no longer exists as they get older, that this will be the end of this regime and they'll be reading about it in history books rather than in the news. Okay, let's go to our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In this last segment of the show, in a way, following up on these last two segments where I was saying the first one that although we might feel guilty complaining about our problems when we think about the people of Iran, which can completely make sense when we consider the perspective of how much worse it is or how lucky you might be to have the problems that you even are having at the moment. But remembering that by not taking care of, first of all, everyone's pain deserves to get attended to, and it can. So if you can take care of yourself, you should be doing that. And also remembering that by ignoring your pain or giving yourself more pain, it doesn't help the people of Iran, even though it might feel like, okay, well, I'm making things more equal in some way, or I'm sharing something with them, or there's some sense of harmony or unity. You're not helping them by hurting yourself. It just is the case. And think about yourself. If you were, you had a sore throat, you want everyone else to have a sore throat, especially your loved ones? No, you want them to feel good and be okay. And also, again, it's not helping them when you're in pain. And then the last segment, I was talking about how, although we don't want to ignore the stories of the people of Iran at all, we want to actually be listening to them and sharing them with others and sharing them with the world, so the world does not ignore them. It doesn't mean that 24/7 we only should focus on that, and that you should feel bad if you focus on other things. And I was thinking about, especially when you have responsibilities and relationships of responsibility, like being a parent, you have to make sure you show up for those in those relationships the best way that you can. And so, in both of those segments, there is some sense of, doing, almost consider doing less is okay, or maybe, you shouldn't care so much, which is not at all my intention. Is actually to say that you should care as much as you can. And it's not the thought that counts, it's our actions that matter. So it's not just the feelings that matter. Do all that you can to help. And even realizing, well, one, those things I was talking about, you're not helping them if you ignore your own pain, or you're not helping them if you feel like you don't look at anything but their pain. It doesn't really give them anything. If it's just you looking at videos, let's say, or just being sad about something, doesn't help them. So that's the important thing. And actually, it'll help you help them for a longer time, whatever help we can give, to make sure we don't burn out or give up or lose hope, to just keep doing what we can. So the better we actually take care of ourselves, the more we can help and the longer we can help. So I wanted to make that clear and reiterate that. And in this last segment, I actually want to talk about how, it might seem like a reaction related to those things I was saying. It's a very different one, but we are very good as humans of doing mental gymnastics to find a way to get to a place that feels better for us. So what I mean is that we always have this, it's like a homeostasis, like a thermostat, that, you're feeling hot or you're feeling cold. You try to come back to some middle that feels better. You feel a tension, a pain, we try to come back to a better place. And so how that relates to what I'm talking about, or this situation in Iran, is that when we see a situation like Iran, which is painful, sad, makes us angry to see what is going on, that obviously doesn't feel good. Those are unpleasant emotions to have. And so we try to deal with those feelings, try to get rid of those negative or unpleasant feelings and come to a better place, come back to that homeostatic, center of feeling okay. But that's hard to do when a situation is so painful, is so sad, and doesn't seem to change, or at least doesn't seem to change quickly. So right now, for Iranians day to day, it's just there's a sad situation, and it's still sad or still painful that it is going on. And again, nothing to compare to what the people in Iran are going through. But in general, I speak to the people outside of Iran, not because they're more important. They're definitely not. The people in Iran are the most important, but because I can't give guidance to the people in Iran. I can just admire and amplify what they're going through, what they're doing, but I don't feel it is my place to give, some kind of advice or thoughts or guidance to them. But to those of us outside of Iran, there can be, yes, we might get too inundated with it. That's one thing. But then you might go to the other extreme of, let me just not feel anything at all about what's happening in Iran, because it's painful and it doesn't seem like that pain is going away because the situation doesn't change. And so then we can get very, good at doing something bad, but very good at finding ways to justify or ignore what's happening. We might just try to deny it altogether, stop looking, pretend like it's not happening, or even before that, maybe looking at maybe it's fake, maybe it's doctored or exaggerated, maybe it's not that bad, which is sometimes things that we might hear. Or, things like, oh, well, the world is unfair. That's something that I hear. The world is unfair. So that's just how it is sometimes. And yes, the world is unfair, but that's not an ending point, either literally or, in our thinking. The world is unfair, and we have to do everything we can to make it more fair, meaning that when things are unfair, we have to let it bother us and be upset by it, not to think it's okay and just justify it as the world being the way that it is. That's not how it works. The world is unfair, yes, and we should do something about it. Not the world is unfair, and so because of that, no matter what I do, it'll still be unfair, so I shouldn't do anything. I shouldn't feel anything. That to me is a very almost childish way of approaching the world, a way of just trying to make ourselves feel good in the moment, just to, get over the pain and really facing the reality of what is going on there. So be wary of, ourselves doing it, but also other people who will share messages that, try to sugarcoat things, try to make everything about a silver lining. try to, say, oh, I know it's going to get better. I do believe in having hope, but not in some kind of false hope or some guaranteed hope that is not real or, based in any kind of realistic experience. So, because that happens when we don't feel good, there's this reaction to try to get to feeling good. You even see this. Someone tells a story like, oh, I lost my job or this happened. And there's just this strong pull from everyone involved to try to get back to some it's okay place. And I'm not saying it's always bad. So it could be helpful and someone might need that to stabilize it and move forward. But we have to be careful not to do that same thing to undermine people's pain and suffering when it's not okay. And so this goes back to a theme I've discussed a lot in relation to mental health and what I think is one of the biggest markers and signs of mental health, which is frustration tolerance or distress tolerance. Basically, this ability to tolerate, not to want or desire or to stay stuck in it, but to be able to tolerate feeling bad, because life inevitably will make us feel bad sometimes. So it's not about never feeling bad. It's about what do we do when we feel bad? How do we respond to it? Do we first try to understand it because there's information there that can help us understand ourselves better, understand our circumstances better, even understand how to prevent that kind of pain in the future? That is very important. And then how do we respond to it as far as actions we take? Do we try to quickly get it away? Do we try to ignore it altogether? Do we try to engage in some kind of behavior to make us feel good, or take some kind of substance to instantly or very quickly feel good? That's what happens when we don't have that distress and frustration tolerance. We think we have to just run away from the bad feeling as quickly as possible, but that leads to us doing unhealthy things to cope with the inevitable bad feelings that will come up in life, because that's part of life, is you feel good and you also feel not good. That's just how it is. And then importantly, if we have that mindset, we might try to ignore or undermine the suffering of other people because it doesn't feel good and I don't want to not feel good and I can't tolerate not feeling good. So I have to find a way out of it, which might mean, ignoring it, minimizing it. It's not that big of a deal. This is another reason why we can be very prone to blaming the victim. Oh, something happened. So, no, maybe it was their fault. They did something, because that's a lot more comforting than this is just unfair or unjust. This is, it's not their fault. They're hurting. This is something not right. And we have to try to make it right. That's a lot harder position than, well, they have no one to blame but themselves. It was their fault. So, nothing to see here. We can move on. And so to care about Iran, we have to be willing to sit with this discomfort of facing the reality, which is an unpleasant reality at this time. I'm not saying don't have hope. That hope is necessary to even act and even to try to help, that you feel that there's some possibility that things can be better. You have to have that hope. But we don't want to go to some place where we think we have to feel good about it now. That's okay. And to me, it's actually a healthy reaction to not feel good about what is happening in Iran, for it to make you upset, for it to make you sad. That is a healthy reaction. And this actually points, for me, another misunderstanding at times about mental health, that people think, oh, if you're psychologically healthy and strong, you're happy all the time and you feel good all the time. Not at all. That to me is not the psychological healthy stance. That is a fantasy, and someone who's trying to escape from reality, that wants to feel good all the time, or thinks that we're supposed to feel good all the time. And I say this because when something happens and someone is okay with it and someone is upset by it, there's this bias to think the person who's upset is unhealthy and the person who's okay with it is healthy. This person is crying. Well, crying looks like sadness and looks like, almost like depression, or brings up those kinds of, images to us. So that person is unhealthy. The other person is not crying. They're not sad. That's the healthier, stronger person. But when we see something horrible, or if we see something that is not okay, we should not feel okay. We should feel not okay ourselves. Or the analogy I've used before, that if you walk into a room that's full of smoke, coughing is a healthy reaction. Someone who is, let's say, addicted to smoking for many years might walk into a smoke-filled room, and especially in cigarette smoke, and not cough, might even feel good. That's not a sign of health or strength that they feel good in the smoky room. It's actually a sign of a lack of health and of hurting their body repeatedly to the point where poison has felt good to them. And without poison, they feel like they're dying actually without the poison rather than the poison feeling like it's killing them, which it actually is, even if it's slowly over time. So if you react to a injustice or the pain of others and the suffering of others with pain, congratulations, that is a good thing. You'd want to feel that. And so don't try to get rid of that. Yes, going back to what I was saying in the previous segment, we have to be able to go on and go through our lives and especially meet the responsibility of our lives and meet the relational responsibilities we might have as, to family and to especially the kids. So we need to be able to function at some level. But don't think the goal should be to make that sadness or that pain go away. What's happening in Iran is heartbreaking. It's sad. It's makes us angry because it's not fair. It's not just. It's people killing people, just because they want freedom, but because it's going to take away their own power. You see videos of the regime forces literally running people over with their cars. That is a horrible thing. There's no making that okay or good or justified or something we should accept or feel indifferent about. It should make you very, horrified, angry, sad, all of those things. So it's hard to feel those things for a long period of time. But if you want to be there for the people of Iran in whatever way you can, we have to accept that is just the way it is. And again, what they're going through is living through that. We have to just witness it or, see it and think about it. They're actually living through it. So again, giving us that perspective that might help us not only go on, but be more motivated to help them, to imagine what it's like for them to live that, when it's hard for us to even hear about it or see it. So we have to accept feeling bad because that's the situation is unjust, is unfair. And we don't want to try to sugarcoat it and be aware of anyone who tries to sugarcoat it or come up with some kind of justification that makes it okay. Things are not okay. And that's why we keep fighting to try to make it right, to make it okay, and to support the people of Iran in their fight for a free Iran, because that's what we all want. First and foremost, for them who are living there, who have had to suffer and continue to suffer living there. And then for the world itself and for all of us as well, but most importantly, for the people of Iran. All right, that brings us to the end of today's show. A big thank you to Farid in the studio. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee, Free Iran.